Hail, fellow wanderers of the wide world. Welcome once more to these ancient tales. It is I, your humble chronicler of elder days, who greets you with a heart full of light. May this season bring you a very Merry Christmas. In this telling, we shall journey into shadowed depths long forgotten. We shall explore what truly lurked in the abyssal darkness beneath Moria when Gandalf fell with the Balrog. Many eyes turn only to the flame-wreathed demon itself, yet something far older and more terrible waited in those lightless voids. Gandalf himself spoke of creatures so ancient they bear no names, beings that have gnawed at the very foundations of the world since before Sauron drew breath in Arda. Let us descend together, O travelers of Middle-earth. When Gandalf and the Balrog plummeted from the bridge of Khazad-dûm, they fell for what seemed an eternity beyond mortal reckoning. In the pages of The Two Towers, Gandalf recounts this fall with solemn words. If one listens with care, one understands they did not merely plunge into some hidden lake or cavern. They fell through the very bones of the mountain, past chambers wrought by the hands of dwarves in ages past, beyond the endless stair, into regions where no pick nor hammer had ever struck stone. The descent was so vast that Gandalf lost all sense of time and direction. Fire and water clashed in fury around them as they descended, the Balrog's flames hissing against unseen underground streams, birthing clouds of steam and chaos in the endless dark. This was no mere physical fall, O listeners. For a being such as Gandalf the Maya, this descent carried a weight far deeper than geography. They were descending into the very roots of the world itself. Now in The Two Towers, when Gandalf speaks to Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli of his ordeal, he utters words that linger like an ancient warning in the halls of memory. Far, far below the deepest delving of the dwarves, he says, the world is gnawed by nameless things. Not monsters with proud names and shadowed histories, not creatures spawned by the will of Morgoth or Sauron. Nameless things. Tolkien chose that word with deliberate wisdom. These beings have no names, for they walked the world before language itself was born, before the elves awoke and gave names to all they beheld, before the dwarves carved their first halls, before even Morgoth descended into Arda to weave his corruption. These entities belong to the earliest days of creation, perhaps born from the very discord woven into the music of the Ainur. In the Silmarillion, it is told how the world was sung into being. The Ainur raised their voices in harmony under the guidance of Ilúvatar. Yet Melkor, who would become Morgoth, introduced discord into that holy music. He sought to create of his own will, to claim power equal to the One. That discord did not vanish when Arda was made real. It became part of the very fabric of the world, woven into its deepest foundations, the hidden places far below mountains and seas. It is possible that the nameless things Gandalf glimpsed are living echoes of that primordial chaos, beings never meant to walk in the ordered realms of Ilúvatar's design, yet slipping through the cracks of creation like shadows between notes of song. Consider what this meant for Gandalf's long trial. He was indeed a Maya, yet he walked Middle-earth in humble form, clothed in the body of an old man, bound by the restrictions laid upon him by the Valar. He was sent to guide and counsel, not to wage open war with the great powers of darkness. Yet down there, in the abyssal deep, he stood not only against the Balrog, but in the shadow of things that perhaps even the Valar would regard with solemn caution. These nameless things, according to Gandalf's own grave testimony, have gnawed at the roots of the earth since before any recorded tale of the world. They are patient, they are ever hungry, and they dwell in a state that may not be wholly physical as we understand it. What exactly did Gandalf behold in those depths? He offers no full recounting, and perhaps that silence is itself a mercy. Some horrors gain greater power when left to the imagination of those who hear the tale. Yet we may gather clues from his words. He speaks of gnawing, a ceaseless devouring of the very substance of the earth, slowly, inexorably breaking down the foundations of Arda. This is not the deliberate malice of Sauron, nor the proud rebellion of Morgoth. It is something more ancient, more alien, a force that may not even perceive the world above in any way we would recognize. These beings simply exist and consume, following patterns laid down in the first moments of creation, or perhaps in the discord that preceded it. The courage Gandalf showed in pursuing the Balrog into such depths is beyond the measure of ordinary hearts. He could have turned aside, he could have sought a path back to the light, yet he knew the Balrog was a clear and present peril to the Fellowship and to all free peoples of Middle-earth. Thus he followed it downward into places where even his immortal spirit stood in peril, not merely of death, For Maiar do not perish as mortals do, but of dissolution, of corruption, or of being lost forever in those primordial abysses. For 10 days he battled the Balrog, from the lowest dungeons to the highest peak. And throughout those 10 days in the deep, he moved among things that filled even him with awe and dread. Things that could frighten Gandalf the Grey. That thought alone carries the weight of ages. There is a reason Tolkien let Gandalf speak of these nameless things only in passing. It casts a veil of cosmic horror across the tapestry of Middle-earth that many readers feel only as a distant chill upon first hearing the tale. We are accustomed to foes we can name: orcs, trolls, Nazgûl, Sauron himself, enemies with clear purpose and desire. Yet beneath all these lies something older, something that stirs in the roots of the mountains, making even the Balrog seem almost familiar by comparison. When Gandalf returned as Gandalf the White, he had walked to the very edge of existence and come back changed by what he had seen in the spaces between the world's foundations. The depths beneath Moria echo a truth Tolkien explored more fully in the Silmarillion: that evil in Middle-earth has many layers, like the strata of ancient stone. There are the immediate threats of Sauron and Saruman. There are the older evils of the Balrogs, servants of Morgoth from the First Age. But beneath even these lies something more primal. Morgoth himself did not create evil from nothing in the beginning. He took what already existed, the discord within the music of the Ainur, and shaped it, amplified it, gave it form and terrible purpose. Yet the raw chaos and disharmony that predated even him has always lingered. In the deepest places of the world, it has never fully faded. When the dwarves delved too greedily and too deep in Moria, they were not merely seeking mithril. They were piercing layers of reality sealed since the shaping of Arda. Mithril itself holds strange wonder in this tale. It is stronger than steel, yet light as a leaf upon the wind, found only in the depths of Moria, and it glows with its own inner light. Perhaps this miraculous metal was born in those deep places precisely because of the unnatural forces at work there, where the laws of matter and creation bend near the borders of primordial chaos. The dwarves were digging at the very boundary between the ordered world and the abyss beneath. They gained great wealth, yet they also awakened that which they could not master. Durin's folk had dwelt in Khazad-dûm for long ages before they roused the Balrog. The Balrog had slumbered there since the end of the First Age, since the War of Wrath when Morgoth was overthrown and his servants scattered or hid. More than 5,000 years of darkness. Was it truly asleep all that time? Or did it sense, even dimly, the presence of things far older and more alien that surrounded it in the deep? The Balrog is a corrupted Maya, a spirit of fire and shadow, mighty and dreadful. Yet even it chose to conceal itself in the darkest, deepest place it could find. Perhaps it was not only fleeing the hosts of the West, perhaps it also sought refuge from the nameless things that gnaw ever deeper still. In the brief but weighty passage of the Two Towers, Gandalf describes tunnels where no living foot had trodden, where the very stone felt unlike any rock shaped by dwarf or worn by time. These were not caverns smoothed by water over eons. They were spaces that seemed to exist in the gaps of the world, geological impossibilities that somehow endured. The air itself was strange, and time flowed differently. For 10 days, Gandalf pursued the Balrog upward from those abyssal depths, fighting through tunnels and chambers until at last they reached the summit of Xiraxigil, where the light of the sun could touch them once more. Yet in those 10 days, Gandalf walked utterly alone save for his foe. No companions, no fellowship, no light but the fire of his own spirit and the flames of the Balrog. Only darkness, stone, and the silent knowledge that beneath him, even as he climbed, things far older than his quest gnawed ceaselessly at the roots of existence. He dared not dwell long upon it, lest fear weaken his will. He kept his mind fixed upon the immediate peril, the Balrog, while knowing in his heart that he fought in a realm where the very notions of good and evil grew dim and strange. The Balrog was evil, yes, twisted by the will of Morgoth. But the things in the deep were not evil in that same sense. They were something else entirely, existing beyond the moral framework that has shaped the long struggles of Middle-earth. In one of his letters, Tolkien reflected upon the nature of evil in his world. Morgoth could not truly create, he could only corrupt what Ilúvatar had made. Yet there are hints of forces that existed in the margins, part of the growing pains of a world still taking shape from the music. When Arda was formed, the process was not without flaw. There were contradictions, unresolved discords, places where the great song did not fully harmonize. These found physical form in the deepest abysses, the roots of mountains, the hidden spaces between the foundations of the earth. Gandalf's brief mention of the nameless things is one of the rare moments, where Tolkien allows a glimpse of cosmic horror to touch his legendarium. A horror more akin to ancient and incomprehensible forces than the willed evils we know. Most evils in Middle-earth have purpose we can grasp. Sauron seeks dominion, Saruman seeks power, orcs seek ruin. Even Morgoth's vast malice sprang from jealousy, pride, and the lust to rule. But nameless things that gnaw the earth are different. They want nothing. They simply are. Their very existence stands against the ordered harmony of the world above. They may embody entropy itself, the slow return toward chaos that ever presses against the music's imposed order. The Balrog, by contrast, feels almost known. It serves a fallen agenda, carries fire and darkness, wields whip and flaming blade. It can be confronted, and as Gandalf proved, it can be defeated. But how does one defeat that which has no name? How does one fight a force that dwells between being and unbeing, gnawing reality from within? One does not. One can only avoid it, keep distance from the depths where it dwells, and pray that the foundations of the world remain strong enough to contain it. This truth deepens the tragedy of Moria. The dwarves did not merely lose their greatest kingdom to a Balrog, they lost it because they delved into places that should have remained sealed forever. Their hunger for mithril and for glory broke through barriers that had long protected the lands above from what lay beneath. Once those seals were broken, there was no returning to innocence. The Balrog rose, yes, but the passages now lay open. Who can say what else might have begun to stir and creep upward through those forsaken tunnels? Even the Watcher in the water at the western gate of Moria may be tied to this ancient unrest. Gandalf himself speaks of it with uncertainty, rare for one so wise. The dwarves fled, and Moria stood empty for more than 1,000 years before the Fellowship dared to pass its shadowed gates. In all that long silence, who can say what else might have stirred and risen from the abyss below? The Watcher in the water that guarded the western gate may well be connected to this ancient stirring. Gandalf himself spoke of it with rare uncertainty, saying it had lain long in the dark, growing in strength, and that the waters of the Cyrenen had grown foul and stagnant because of its presence. The creature bore many tentacles, strong enough to nearly drag Frodo into the depths, and it seemed to single out the ring-bearer with fell intent. Yet Gandalf did not name it as one of Sauron's servants. That silence is telling. Could it be something that had crept upward after the dwarves broke the ancient seals? Could it be kin to, or even spawned by, the nameless things that gnaw below? In the broader tapestry of Tolkien's mythology, there is precedent for such horrors. Recall Ungoliant, the great spider who came from the darkness beyond the world. She was not born of Morgoth's will, but something else, a hunger from the outer void. She allied with Morgoth only so long as it served her endless appetite. When she turned upon him, even the Dark Lord barely escaped with his life. Afterward, she fled into forgotten lands and was never seen again in the tales of the elder days. Some of Tolkien's notes suggest she wandered south and east, into regions unmapped by elves or men. Yet it is possible that creatures of her kind, or lesser echoes of that same primordial hunger, found their way into the deep places of the earth. There they could dwell unseen, slowly spawning their own kind in the eternal dark. The Watcher's many tentacles, its love of darkness, its seeming immortality, all speak of something very old and alien to the natural order of Middle-earth. If it is indeed linked to the things beneath Moria, then it may be but a lesser manifestation of that primordial chaos, a being that can endure in water and shadow, but is not yet fully emerged into the light of the ordered world. Gandalf's uncertainty and his sense that the creature had been growing in the dark suggest that these deep earth beings are not static. They change, they adapt, and they may spawn in ways that defy the laws of living things known to elf or man. When the Fellowship passed through Moria, they felt the heavy weight of that ancient darkness pressing upon them. Gimli had hoped to find his cousin Balin's colony still thriving, yet they found only death and desolation. The orcs had claimed the halls, yes, but there was another presence in the air, a deeper wrongness that went beyond mere enemy occupation. Gandalf was tense from the moment they entered, ever listening, ever watchful. He knew what lurked below, not only the Balrog, but the far older implication of what lay beneath even that terror. Every step they took was a step above an unseen abyss, foundations long weakened by the dwarves' reckless delving and the awakening of ancient evils. In the chamber of Mazarbul, where they discovered Balin's tomb, the record spoke of desperate last stands against overwhelming darkness. The book told of orc attacks, but also of drums in the deep, a sound that filled the dwarves of Balin's company with unearthly dread before the end. What made that sound? Orcs can beat drums, yet the phrasing carries a heavier weight, as though something older was communicating through the very stone. Could the nameless things, in their ceaseless gnawing and movement through the roots of the mountain, have sent vibrations echoing upward? Might the dwarves have heard not only their immediate foes, but the restless stirring of things far older and deeper, disturbed by battle and death above? When the Balrog finally appeared, it came with a presence of ancient and terrible power that silenced even the orcs. They fled before it in terror. The Balrog was their master in Morgoth's ancient order, yet more than hierarchy was at work. It was a remnant from an age before their own, a being from the First Age, when Morgoth himself walked the earth in bodily form and waged war against the Valar. Its very presence reminded all who beheld it that the story of evil in Middle-earth is long and layered, and that the troubles of the Third Age were but the latest chapter in a far older tale. Gandalf stood upon the bridge of Khazad-dûm because he knew someone must. He was the only one among the Fellowship with the power to contest such a being. The other Istari might have had the strength. Saruman certainly possessed great power, yet Saruman had already fallen into corruption, and Radagast had long turned his heart toward the beasts and birds of the wild, leaving the affairs of elves and men behind. Only Gandalf remained. Staff in one hand, the sword Glamdring in the other, he faced a creature that had once terrorized the greatest elven kingdoms of the First Age. And he knew that if he fell with it into the abyss, he would be descending into regions that filled even his immortal spirit with solemn dread. The words, "Fly, you fools," have been pondered by many tongues across the ages. In this moment, they carry deeper meaning. Gandalf was not merely urging them to flee the Balrog. He was telling them to escape Moria entirely, to leave that shadowed place while they still could. For if he should fail and the Balrog survive, the Fellowship would have no hope. But perhaps he also spoke from knowledge of what lay far below, warning them to stay far from the primordial darkness into which he was about to descend. He was preparing to enter the ancient void, and he wished them to remain in the sunlight, where evil, though terrible, was at least a foe that could be named and understood. The battle upon the bridge was swift yet decisive. Gandalf's power shattered the stone, and the Balrog fell into the gulf below. But its whip lashed out one final time, catching Gandalf by the ankle and dragging him over the edge. In that instant, Gandalf made his choice. He could have saved himself with the arts of the Maiar, yet he did not. He held fast, then let go, accepting the fall. For he knew that if he did not pursue and finish the Balrog in the depths, it would return to hunt the Fellowship, or rise later to threaten other lands. Thus he fell into darkness and uncertainty, trusting that his mission and the grace granted him would prove sufficient against whatever awaited below. The fall itself must have been a terror beyond words. Not only the physical plunge through endless dark, but the spiritual weight of descending into a realm where the nameless things stirred. Gandalf would have felt their presence in the stone and the water around him, knowing he had entered their ancient domain. His own inner light, the radiance of his Maya spirit, was the only beacon holding back that primordial darkness. The Balrog, creature of fire and shadow, burned defiantly against the same void. They plunged into a deep underground lake that had never known sun or moon. The water was cold beyond any chill Gandalf had known in Middle-earth, a cold that seeped into the very spirit. The Balrog's flames hissed and steamed furiously, yet they did not die. In that lightless lake they fought, light and fire against the crushing weight of stone and water, and against the unseen presence of things far older than either of them. How long they struggled there, Gandalf does not say. Time itself had lost all meaning in those depths. The water carried the sounds of their battle strangely, echoing through caverns and tunnels that stretched into unmapped eternity. At length, Gandalf drove the Balrog out of the water and into the tunnels beyond. These were passages the dwarves had never reached, spaces that seemed to exist in the natural or unnatural structure of the mountain, perhaps hollowed over ages by the ceaseless gnawing of the nameless things. The rock here was strange, Gandalf recounted, unlike any stone of Upper Moria, not granite, nor basalt, nor any named mineral. but something altered by forces beyond the knowledge of mortal or immortal craftsmen. Perhaps it had been changed by the pressure of the abyss, or by the long touch of those primordial beings as they consumed the earth around them. In those tunnels, Gandalf and the Balrog fought with blade and flame, with word and spell, with the very essence of their Maya natures. The Balrog sought to escape, to climb back toward levels it knew, but Gandalf would not permit it. He harried the creature, drove it upward, and slowly wore it down blow by blow. He wielded Glamdring, the foe hammer, a blade forged in Gondolin in the First Age, made specifically to battle the servants of Morgoth. In Gandalf's hands, the sword sang with ancient purpose. Yet the Balrog was mighty beyond measure. It had survived the War of Wrath, had hidden for more than 5,000 years, and had slain countless dwarves when it awoke. It wielded weapons of living flame, a sword hotter than any mortal fire, and a whip that could shatter stone. Every strike Gandalf had to counter or evade, every spell he had to match or deflect, and all the while, in the stone, in the darkness around them, the nameless things continued their patient, eternal gnawing. If Gandalf had fallen there, if the Balrog had slain him, his spirit would have been released from its mortal form. Yet in that place so far from the light, would it have found its way back to the halls of Mandos in Valinor? Or might it have been trapped, or even consumed, by the things that dwelt in that primordial darkness? These were the true stakes Gandalf faced, not merely physical death, which, as a Maya, he had known in other forms, but the terrible possibility of being truly lost. The mission entrusted to him by the Valar might have failed, not because Sauron overcame him, but because he had descended so far into the abyss that he could not return. The ring would have continued toward Mordor without his guidance, and the free peoples would have fought on without his counsel. Thus he fought with a strength beyond what he had believed possible. Day after day they climbed. The Balrog sought escape, and Gandalf sought victory. They rose through ever more familiar levels, from the strange deep rock to tunnels showing signs of ancient dwarvish work, and at last into the great halls and chambers the dwarves had carved in the days of their glory. They climbed the endless stair, a marvel of dwarvish skill that ascended from the lowest dungeons all the way to the summit of the mountain. Sometimes the stair passed through open shafts, sometimes through narrow corridors. It became the stage for an epic battle between two mighty Maiar. In those confined spaces there was no room for grand spells or sweeping blows, only close, desperate blade work. The Balrog's great size became a hindrance in the narrow passages, yet its strength remained overwhelming. Gandalf called upon every art and technique he had learned across his long existence. He fought not merely as Gandalf the Grey, the counselor and guide, but as a Loren the Maya who had once walked in the gardens of Valinor before the world grew old. He reached into depths of power he had been forbidden to touch under ordinary circumstances, for this was no ordinary trial, this was survival, and more than survival. It was the solemn duty to ensure that the Balrog would never again threaten the free peoples of Middle-earth. They reached the peak at last, Durin's tower upon the summit of Xuraxigel. Here, at the crown of the mountain, they had room to fight openly once more. The sun was rising, the first natural light Gandalf had beheld in 10 long days. The Balrog burst into full flame, no longer dampened by water nor confined by stone. It became what it truly was, a creature of fire and shadow, wings of darkness spreading wide, though whether those wings could bear it aloft, or were but manifestations of its power, the lore leaves unspoken. Gandalf stood before it, staff raised, Glamdring shining with reflected firelight. For a moment the two ancient beings regarded each other in the dawn, as though the long ages of the world had come to a single point of final reckoning. Then they fought the last battle. Up here, Gandalf could draw upon the light of the sun, the clean wind of the high peaks, and the pure air that had never known the taint of the deep. He cast down the Balrog with all his remaining power, and the creature fell from the peak, its fire extinguished at last. Yet the effort cost Gandalf everything. He had burned through his mortal form, pushing the body of the old man beyond all endurance. He died there upon the peak. His body failed and his spirit departed, beginning the long journey back to Valinor and the halls of Mandos. In his own heart, he believed he had failed. Though he had defeated the Balrog, he had left the Fellowship without guidance, abandoned his mission, and fallen when he was most needed. But the Valar saw otherwise. They beheld a Maya who had descended into the literal depths of evil, who had faced not only a Balrog, but the primordial chaos at the roots of the world, who had fought without rest or aid for 10 days and had triumphed. They sent him back, not as Gandalf the Grey, but as Gandalf the White, with greater power and fewer restraints. They gave him Saruman's former place as head of the Astari Order, and returned him to Middle-earth to complete his sacred charge. When he returned, he carried with him the memory of the deep, the knowledge of what lurked beneath Moria, and the understanding that evil in Middle-earth has many hidden layers that most eyes never suspect. Gandalf's journey through the depths beneath Moria represents a profound truth woven into the fabric of Tolkien's mythology. It reveals that even in a world of clear moral lines between light and shadow, there remain mysteries and horrors that transcend those boundaries. The nameless things are not servants of Sauron or Morgoth. They are something else entirely, a presence that was there before the beginning and will remain after the end, gnawing patiently and timelessly at the foundations of Arda. They stand as a reminder that creation is never fully tamed, that chaos lingers always at the edges, and that the music of the Ainur left discordant notes within the world's structure that may never be fully resolved. For the rest of the great tale, Gandalf carried this knowledge with him. When he counseled the free peoples about the danger of Sauron, he did so with the quiet awareness that Sauron, terrible though he was still a comprehensible evil, one that could be fought and, with courage and sacrifice, defeated. The nameless things could not. Therefore, the wisest course was to stay far from the depths where they dwell. This is why Gandalf remained so insistent throughout the rest of the War of the Ring upon measured and careful paths. He had seen what happens when one delves too greedily and too deep, when one pushes beyond the ancient boundaries that should be respected. The dwarves learned this lesson in blood and ruin. Gandalf learned it through battle, death, and rebirth. Now he used that hard-won wisdom to guide the free peoples toward victory, while avoiding catastrophes that might unleash evils even greater than Sauron. The connection between these deep places and Morgoth's ancient works cannot be ignored. In the First Age, Morgoth ruled from Angband, a vast fortress in the north. Beneath Angband lay dungeons and mines, where he bred his servants, tortured captives, and performed his experiments in corruption and malice. The foundations of Angband reached deeper than any elven kingdom or dwarvish hall. Morgoth was not merely mining for ore, he was searching for power itself. He sought the roots of the world, the places where reality grew thin, hoping to exert his will upon the fundamental nature of Arda. Morgoth never fully succeeded in his darkest ambitions. The Valar cast him into the void beyond the world. Yet his works remained, the tunnels he delved, the passages he carved, the corruptions he introduced into the deep earth. These did not vanish when he was defeated. They linger still, forming vast hidden networks beneath the surface of Middle-earth. Moria's deepest levels may connect to these ancient works of Morgoth. The dwarves, in their mining, may have broken into spaces once carved by his servants millennia before, chambers that still carried the lingering taint of his presence and his failed experiments. If this be true, then what Gandalf encountered in the deep was not only natural primordial chaos, but also the remnants of Morgoth's attempts to harness and weaponize that chaos. Failed creations, abandoned experiments, corrupted elements left to fester in the darkness. The nameless things may therefore include both the truly ancient primordial beings and the twisted products of Morgoth's long labor, all mingled together in a nightmare realm beneath the mountains. This truth makes the tragedy of the dwarves even more profound. They were not merely greedy for mithril, they were reclaiming what they saw as their ancient birthright, the greatest of all dwarvish kingdoms. In doing so, they dug into layers of time and evil that predated their entire race. The dwarves were created by Aule, one of the Valar, yet the things beneath Moria were there long before the dwarves awoke, before the elves opened their eyes, perhaps even before the world took its final, settled form. For all their skill and strength, the dwarves were like children playing in a graveyard of powers they could not comprehend. Durin the Deathless, eldest of the dwarf fathers, founded Khazad-dûm in the First Age. He delved deep, yet he knew when to stop. For thousands of years, his descendants honored that balance. They mined with wisdom and restraint. It was only in later ages, when memory faded and greed grew strong, that they pushed too far. They found mithril, that miraculous metal, and in their excitement they forgot the ancient caution of their forefathers. They delved too greedily and too deep, and they paid the price in blood and ruin. Mithril itself deserves reflection in this tale. It is found nowhere else in Middle-earth. Lighter than silk, yet harder than dragon scales, shining with its own inner light. It is an anomaly in the natural order. Perhaps it was forged in those deep places where reality bends near the borders of primordial chaos. Perhaps mithril is what remains when ordinary metal is exposed across long ages to the gnawing of the nameless things, transformed by proximity to chaos into something impossible and precious. If so, then every piece of mithril in Middle-earth carries within it a faint trace of the deep, a quiet reminder of what lurks far below. Bilbo's mithril coat, which later protected Frodo, was forged from this very metal. It saved the ring-bearer's life more than once. Yet it was born from the same depths that nearly claimed Gandalf. There is a deep poetic irony in this, that the armor guarding the hope of the free peoples was wrought from metal mined at the boundary between order and primordial chaos. Good and terrible are often intimately bound together in Tolkien's world. The Balrog, Doran's bane, adds yet another layer to this sorrowful tale. When the dwarves awakened it, the creature had slumbered for more than 5,000 years. Was it truly alone in those depths? Did it sense, even dimly, the nameless things that surrounded it? Balrogs are Maiar like Gandalf, yet they chose to serve Morgoth and were corrupted by that allegiance. They became beings of fire and shadow, powerful and malevolent, yet still possessed of thought and will. This Balrog fled into Moria after Morgoth's defeat and hid in the deepest darkness it could find. Why did it remain hidden so long? Fear of the Valar and their servants was surely part of it, but perhaps also because the deep places, for all their horror, offered a strange kind of protection. The nameless things gnawed the earth, yet perhaps they left the Balrog untouched, too powerful, too clearly defined an entity to be consumed by their formless chaos. Or perhaps a silent accord existed, the Balrog dwelling in a middle depth, neither rising to the surface where it might be hunted, nor descending further into regions where even it dared not go. When the dwarves awakened it, they shattered that fragile balance. The Balrog erupted into the inhabited halls, slew Durin's folk, and began its reign of terror. Yet it did not remain in one place. It ranged throughout Moria, as though claiming territory or searching for something lost. What might a Balrog seek in the depths of Moria? Perhaps escape routes or other servants of Morgoth still hidden in the mountain. Or perhaps it was disturbed by what the dwarves' mining had revealed, and sought to seal or avoid those dangerous breaches. The possibility that more than one Balrog still hides in the deep places of Middle-earth is supported by Tolkien's own writings. Some of Morgoth's Balrogs survived the War of Wrath and fled into hiding. Moria's Balrog was but one. Others may lie in different mountain ranges or forgotten caverns, each surrounded by the same primordial horrors. Each a sleeping threat waiting to be disturbed by reckless delving or the slow shifting of the earth. This raises a sobering thought. The defeat of Sauron and the end of the War of the Ring may not mark the final victory over all darkness in Middle-earth. Sauron was a known evil that could be confronted and overthrown. But the deep evils, the Balrogs, still hidden, and the nameless things in the abyss remain. They are patient. They do not concern themselves with rings of power or the rise and fall of kingdoms. They exist on a different timescale, a different plane of threat altogether. The Fourth Age may heal the wounds of Sauron's war, yet the Fifth Age and those that follow will still have to contend with what gnaws eternally at the foundations of the world. Gandalf's ordeal granted him a unique and solemn perspective. After his return as Gandalf the White, he was more focused, more purposeful, yet also more aware of the limits of what even the greatest among the free peoples could achieve. He knew defeating Sauron was vital, but he also understood it was not the end of all evil. The best that could be hoped for was to hold back the darkness for a time, granting the good peoples of Middle-earth a chance to live and flourish, while the ancient horrors continued their slow gnawing far below. In one of his letters, Tolkien spoke of eucatastrophe, the sudden joyous turn in a tale that brings hope against all expectation. He wrote that true eucatastrophe does not erase all danger, but offers a glimpse of grace and victory against overwhelming odds. The defeat of Sauron was such a eucatastrophe for Middle-earth, yet it was not the end of the story. The world continued, carrying with it all the layers of history and hidden horror built across the ages. Gandalf understood this truth more deeply than almost any other being in Middle-earth, for he had walked to the bottom of the abyss and returned. The depths beneath Moria stand as a physical symbol of this enduring reality. No matter how high the towers of Minas Tirith may rise, no matter how fair the gardens of Lothlorien may bloom, beneath it all lies the abyss. The foundations are compromised. Primordial chaos gnaws upward, slow, patient, inexorable. The surest defense is awareness, caution, and the hard-won wisdom never to delve too greedily or too deep. The dwarves learned this in blood and loss. Gandalf learned it through battle, death, and rebirth. The question that remains for the free peoples in the ages to come is whether they will remember these hard lessons, or whether new generations in time will forget and repeat the same fateful mistakes. In the immediate years after the War of the Ring, this was not yet a pressing concern. Sauron had been defeated, Mordor lay in ruins. The Nazgûl were destroyed, and the One Ring was unmade. There was peace and a precious chance for healing and rebuilding. Yet Tolkien was ever mindful of the cyclical nature of history in his world. Ages rise and fall, kingdoms flourish and fade, and the same patterns return in new guises. The Fourth Age would give way to the Fifth and eventually to the Age of Men, when magic fades and the world grows closer to our own. But the deep places remain. Who can say what may yet emerge from those lightless depths in ages yet to come? The nameless things that gnaw the earth are patient beyond the comprehension of mortal or elf. They were there before the sun and moon were kindled. They will remain long after the last elf has sailed into the west and the last dwarf has carved his final stone. They represent a truth that Tolkien rarely spoke of directly, yet which underlies the whole of his legendarium. That evil and chaos are not mere accidents or aberrations, but fundamental threads woven into the very making of creation. Morgoth's discord in the music did not arise from nothing. It sprang from his desire to create independently of Ilúvatar. Yet that very desire reveals that the potential for discord was already present within the great theme, waiting to be expressed. This is heavy and ancient knowledge, and it is why Tolkien does not linger long upon it. The Lord of the Rings is, at its heart, a tale of hope, a story showing how even the smallest and most humble can change the course of the world through courage, friendship, and sacrifice. To dwell too deeply on cosmic horror would have dimmed the light of that central message. Yet Tolkien was too honest a teller of tales to pretend that the defeat of Sauron meant the end of all evil forever. He left these quiet hints, these brief references to nameless things and primordial horrors, to remind those who listen with care that the world is vast, ancient, and far more mysterious than we can fully grasp. Some mysteries are better left undisturbed, their secrets sealed in the deep places where only the wisest and most courageous dare tread. Gandalf's battle with the Balrog, his long descent into the abyss, and his hard-won climb back into the light stand as a microcosm of the greater story of Middle-earth. He went down into literal darkness, faced death and something worse than death, and emerged transformed, not only in power, but in understanding. He brought back knowledge of the depths, yet he did not allow that knowledge to paralyze his will. Instead, he used it to sharpen his focus upon what could still be achieved in the present hour. He could not banish the nameless things that gnaw eternally at the roots of the world. But he could defeat Sauron, guide the free peoples, and ensure that the immediate shadow was driven back. That was enough. That had to be enough. The rest lies beyond even the power of the Astari, and must be left to the will of greater powers and the turning of ages yet unborn. The endless stair that Gandalf and the Balrog climbed is itself a symbol of profound meaning. It is a dwarvish wonder, a feat of engineering that connects the lowest dungeons to the highest peak. The very existence of such a stair suggests that the dwarves of old foresaw a need for passage between the extremes of their mountain realm. Perhaps early explorers of the deep had built it as an escape route. Perhaps it was raised as a challenge to prove they could link the heights and depths of their home. Or perhaps it carried a deeper, almost sacred purpose, a physical echo of the soul's journey from darkness into light. Whatever its original intent, the endless stair became the stage for one of the most epic battles ever fought in Middle-earth. Every step bore witness to blade and spell, fire and counterfire. The Balrog sought to escape downward or sideways. Gandalf drove it relentlessly upward. The stair was damaged in the struggle, some sections cracked by flame or shattered by the weight of two mighty Maiar. Yet overall, it held. Dwarvish craftsmanship, even from the Elder Days, was made to endure. Those who carved the endless stair thousands of years before could never have imagined what titanic conflict it would one day witness. Yet they built it true and strong enough to serve in circumstances far beyond their darkest dreams. When Gandalf at last emerged victorious upon the summit, he stood alone for the first time in 10 days. The Balrog lay defeated, falling broken from the mountain. The sun shone bright upon the snow-covered peak. Gandalf could see for many leagues, the long ranges of the misty mountains stretching north and south, the green lands of Rohan far to the south, and the golden woods of Lothlorien glimmering in the distance. After 10 days of absolute darkness, fighting through tunnels and abysses where no ray of light had ever reached, the sight of the sun and open sky must have been almost overwhelming in its beauty and mercy. Yet his body was failing. He had pushed the mortal form given him by the Valar far beyond its limits. The old man's frame, meant as both vessel and restraint, was breaking. He lay upon the peak, dying, his spirit preparing to depart. In those final moments, did he think of the Fellowship? Did he worry for Frodo and the Ring, for Aragorn and the battles yet to come, for all the plans that now seemed to lie in ruins? Or did a deep peace settle upon him, knowing he had done all that was asked of him, that he had slain the Balrog and prevented it from threatening the world again? The tale does not tell us. Gandalf's death upon the peak is recounted later in quiet reflection. True to his nature, he focuses not on his own feelings, but on the facts that matter, the hard truths, and the path that still lay ahead. If you have walked with me this far through these shadowed paths and ancient lore, I offer you my sincere thanks. You have ventured with patience and open heart into one of the most profound yet often overlooked corners of Tolkien's world. The legendarium he wove is layered beyond measure. Each return to its pages reveals new depths, new wonders, and new solemn truths waiting to be discovered. If this telling has stirred thoughts of other mysteries hidden within Middle-earth, I invite you to share them gently in the comments below. Tell me which forgotten tale or hidden depth you would like to explore together next. There is always more light and shadow waiting to be uncovered in this timeless mythology. Until our paths cross again in these halls of story, keep your feet steady upon the road, your eyes lifted toward the light, and your heart mindful of what may yet lurk in the darkness beneath. May the grace of the Valar and the hope of the elder days go with you. Farewell for now, dear friends, and may your own journey be blessed with courage, wisdom, and the quiet songs of peace. Soft, reflective pause. This has been a chronicle from the deep places of Middle-earth. Walk wisely, and remember, even the smallest light can hold back the oldest dark. Until next we meet beneath the stars, Namadie.